wa Mnyoro. We will ever think about that. Baba, rest well.
Right, so that was what was happening on the floor of the House today. And by the way, there were tributes that were paid in Parliament, both at the National Assembly and at the Senate, and that took place today. I'm back with our conversation here. Dr. Alex Awiti and Nderitu Muriithi, both still with me. In terms of even we've talked about his contribution to democracy as a whole, at large, but there was also the fact that he had a very personal relationship with many politicians, and in some ways, Nderitu, built the careers of many politicians, and we've heard many of them say so, that, he believed in me when I was at this point, he helped me with this campaign, he grew my political career, he, helped nurture that. Was that something you witnessed?
Well, look, Yvonne, the Prime Minister was at the front line of politics, going back to the early 80s, so that many political leaders will have interacted with him in one manner or another. And obviously, if you were working with him, for example, if you're in the same formation, if you're in the same political party and so on. So it is not, it's no surprise that many leaders today in Parliament, outside Parliament, have had a positive influence from the Prime Minister. I guess my only wish is, if you listen to the way the leaders were talking today, and most of them at the COG in the National Assembly, emphasizing this point about reconciliation and dialogue. And I honestly hope that our colleagues in politics then walk the talk, that let us emulate the Prime Minister. And what I myself perhaps take comfort in this evening is simply the overwhelming number of Kenyans who came out. And I tell you, to walk from Jomo Kenyatta to Kasarani is no mean feat. Slowly.
They were in no rush.
It is no mean feat. And it's an incredible thing to witness, to be part of. But back to the leadership, I would say, look, let us walk the talk. There was one particular, I think, in the segment from the coast, one leader saying, look, appealing to mourners that really, as Kenyans, we feel grief, but really the way we can honor our hero is to, be calm, agree and understand that because we are so many, all of us interested to view the Prime Minister's body, all of us interested to be in the places where these events are happening, that we really have to be very tolerant on one another and to listen and to agree, perhaps for once, to follow the way arrangements have been made, because there are so many people. And it is not really possible, for example, that everybody will be in every space. And my heart goes out to the committee, because, they have to balance, they have to, this is a matter of international importance, and they have to balance all these interests. So I would join the leader from the coast who was appealing to mourners that, look, please, let's agree. And it is that dignified send-off that we, as Kenyans, owe really to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and Alex, what would you say about a man who's has such an outpouring of tribute, of grief, of that we've seen on the streets? It's only been 2 days, since yesterday morning when we heard the news, and people were out on the streets. Even in stories we ran yesterday, these are ordinary citizens who somehow feel a connection with the man. Likely some of them may have never seen him face to face in their lifetime, may have never interacted with him personally on a one-to-one basis, but yet there is a connection. What is that for some who say, in fact, he had that connection, unlike perhaps no other leader that we have? What's that ability to connect with people at that level?
I think when it's the issues that he championed, they were very close and dear to many of the people coming out with the depth and the gravity of grief that they've expressed in the last 2 days. The other one we've talked about is just how ordinary he was, and yet he was an extraordinary human being.
Right, yeah.
He was able to connect at that level, that in the moments that he encountered people, they saw themselves in him. They could relate to him, even though his life is vastly different. This is the son of the first Vice President of the Republic of Kenya. He is a child born in privilege, and he's been in the circles of privilege all of his life, but people still found resonance with him in many respects. But I also think that it also speaks to the fact that, you know, politicians and people in places of leadership, if they're really aware of their fundamental role as individuals called to serve, that connection will always be there. But if there are other reasons for power, which is personal aggrandizement and all of that, then you create the disconnect. And I think Raila's life was also in many ways, in the early days of the struggle, it was lived in ways that was very relatable to very ordinary people. To be incarcerated is got the distinction of being the Kenyan who's been detained for the longest, for example. Yeah. In the heyday days of some of the protests and the movement to strengthen our democracy, he was tear gassed and he ran on the streets. And these are things that people relate to. They can actually see themselves in the struggle. So he embodied a lot of personal aspirations, personal struggles, and some of the fears and the hopes and aspirations that Kenyans had. So I think that, to me, is something that really distinguishes him. And right now, if you talk about paying dividend, it is paying dividend in the outpouring of emotions across the divide, from the coast to the heart of our republic, the beloved city of Nairobi, to his hometown in Kisumu and the Siaya part of that. You can see it is Kenyans, as they say, from all walks of life, basically relating and grieving together. So, and going back to John Donne's poem, that every man's death diminishes me. And so Kenyans feel diminished by this loss, in a sense, and they want to reach out and as we say, can we do this in a way that dignifies the man himself, that honors and reveres his contribution and his service and legacy to the country.
Yeah, and like Nderitu was pointing out, from the leaders at the coast who, are talking about how we start to think about moving forward in terms of his life. The best way to mourn or memorialize him would be taking a look at the values of compromise, of debate, of conversation, of understanding different sides to every issue. How do we make sure we don't lose this moment? Because we're in the midst of grief as a country. And, with grief would come certain emotions and promises and pledges that, yes, we will use this moment. How do we make sure we don't lose this and that this actually has a lasting effect? Going beyond, we were speaking here yesterday with Senator Onyonka, and he was imploring his fellow leaders to take cue and maybe have this as a moment of reflection going forward. That's all well and easy to do when you're in a moment such as this. How do we now carry that forward as we continue to mourn, as we move next week, next month, next year?
Well, I'm not sure that I have it all figured out, but I think that, firstly, the conversations about the Prime Minister and what he stood for ought and will continue. They ought to, and I really expect that they will continue. I think, for example, within political circles, for example, within the political party that he led, there is opportunity there for party leadership to emulate. I think the way our members of parliament have spoken today, that, look, it really, democracy is about the art of compromise. There is opportunity there in parliament. to do those things. The way the Council of Governors has spoken, again, there is opportunity there for leaders at the various different levels to practice what we are saying. I would expect, and I know that our history in the recent past perhaps hasn't been as rich in terms of what we do in remembrance of foreign leaders.
Yeah.
In other countries, you will see things like presidential libraries. I mean, work that allows, and I would hope in the fullness, perhaps we are there, that when we look at our foreign leaders, we ought to do certain things that not just honor them, but that also provide the opportunity for the ideas to live on. So let us see what happens in the coming days. But that's certainly, as myself, that's the kind of thing I would wish to see happening, that the work of foundations, the work of prime ministerial, presidential libraries, that kind of work that allows these ideas to take root and to continue to be reflected upon for years to come. One can imagine the kind of work that could go on, say, for example, in universities. You see in other nations, there'll be a chair of one discipline or another, and that chair is funded or organized in memory of. So there's plenty of opportunity. Like you, I hope that as leaders we'll actually then walk the talk.
Yeah.
And it is such a moment for us to reflect and to see the things that bring us together more than celebrate the things that separate us. And that's my wish for this time of reflection.
Yeah, and as an academician, a scholar, Alex, this is, we're Africans, and perhaps a lot of our history is, still to a large extent by word of mouth. How do we then start to tell our stories better and have that history? I mean, our population today is predominantly young, a good proportion of that under the age of 35. Even as we were having these reflections, just a reminder that Raila Odinga was actually a public servant and worked for the Kenya Bureau of Standards and, all of these things, because all of these aspects are important in terms of understanding who a person is, what shapes them, helps their decisions, and those are the things that help us even going forward with other leaders who might be emerging from today going forward, who would want to understand who the man Raila Odinga was. Personal to the extent that we're able to glean that, professional, political, local, international, regional. What are the ways that we start to do that? There's a few books that are out, but yeah.
Well, so the man himself, there's an autobiography.
Yeah.
The Flame of Freedom, for example, and then we have Peeling the Mask by Miguna. So there's elements of it. And one of the things I was thinking about now is reading all books that have been written by political figures and see what mentions of Raila Odinga is in there. But I think, as Dedri says, we need to start advancing kind of scholarly processes, very, very systematic scholarly processes that document and write our contemporary history. A lot of it has been done by literary critics and literary writers like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, for instance. William Wicheng used to write some of the historical part, and Philip Wicheng, for example. But we've lost that culture, for example, of critical, thoughtful political commentary. Well, you see pieces of that in opinion pieces, but it's not organized in the sense that you can actually systematically document the record and the legacy of a political figure like Raila Odinga, for example. So how do you start to create those elements and embed them in our discourse culture and in university departments, name departments that actually do these things? And the other one also, which I think is an excellent challenge, Neritu, is how do you get politicians to start thinking about documenting systematically their own records and having something like a presidential library, for example, so we've got.
Yeah. And I think we have that one already.
We've got a living president here in the name of President Kenyatta.
Yes.
So I would volunteer to come and work in his presidential library and help put some of his things together. President Ruto should be thinking about that. We've got other distinguished political figures like Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, who've served at the highest levels of government. What are they doing about helping us document these legacies, for example? So there is, as you say, we're a very young society. And a lot of these things will be lost very quickly.
Yeah.
And we often forget where we came from. It's been a tempestuous journey to create what we see today as a vibrant, very promising country that is respected among a community of nations. But how do we remind ourselves of what the journey has been?
Yeah.
Who do we honor and who do we valorize in that process?
You know, I suppose I'm an optimist.
Which is a good thing.
The thing is this, Alex, there's often a way in which discourse has been about what hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And I suppose not sufficient
about what
attention
has worked,
to what has worked.
Yeah.
You know, when I look at this country, say, by way of comparison to others, or other societies and so on, we were just in an economic thing down in the coast a couple of weeks ago about ratings.
Yeah.
And what surprised me is when the data was put up for everybody to see about what is the size of this economy, for example, and if you look at all the other macros and you compare, say, to countries like Morocco or Botswana or Mauritius and so on and so on, the standard of living. And it's not to say that we are in Canaan. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
Yet, when you look at it, there is so much that actually has worked, and that society is generally in the correct direction.
Yeah.
So, how did we get there? And it is indeed the roles of many, many leaders.
Yeah.
Raila Odinga, perhaps foremost among them. And, you know, so I think I absolutely agree with you that current leadership, political leaders at all levels, we must be able to put pen to paper, be able to reflect on what is going on. And that perhaps is what will allow leaders who come after to build on what is working and to avoid perhaps what did not work.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think about, I think when we started this conversation about the totality of an individual and of a human being, decisions made, the ones you agree with, the ones you don't agree with, and also, you know, understanding people from all the facets of their lives. And I think perhaps this is a moment to start to do that. For now that we're talking about history, I mean, a good part of that is also in the now. There's been a couple of pictures we've been running of, you know, people's different faces and different reactions today when the body of the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, ran. You know, our viewers are watching this, and so are you, gentlemen. I mean, look at this. This is different people.
Yeah.
His family, mourners, Kenyan citizens, Kenyan leaders. I mean, this is remarkable. As we close, I just want to get from you, each of you, I'll start with you, Alex, how you'll remember today. Because as we keep going, you know, we will document each day as it goes. How will you remember today? A day when Raila Odinga came back very differently from when he left a couple of days ago. What stood out for you today? And I know we're talking about history and how you remember today, but what do you want to see then tomorrow and the day after as we move across this final journey?
So what I remember today is we are now united in grief as a country. And I was flying back into Nairobi today from Kisumu, and as we got on the tarmac, after landing, the KQ guy said, well, so, you know, the pilot comes, you know, disarm the doors and all of that. And then they came back and said, no, ladies and gentlemen, please keep your seats, you know, remain on your seats. And then they said, if you're sitting next to a window, draw down the shutter. And then they said, Then she said, press a button that calls the stewards, and then turn your lights on your phone. And then she switched off the light. And then she said, in honor of the late Prime Minister, we're going to observe a minute of silence. That to me was a very powerful moment. And on that flight, and I was traveling with colleagues that I work with. One is German, there's an American lady, and I was wondering what was going through their minds as Kenyans were going through this ritual, which to me was deeply meaningful, and I understood what the moment was. Yeah. So that's number one. And then the other one is, I was in Kisumu yesterday when the news broke, and we were going out in the field to see some of the farmers we were working with. And in the morning, you could actually see how the news swept through the grief and the reality, the dawning of this disastrous ending. So we went to the field, it was fine and calm, and when we were coming back, the whole city had just turned around in very touching, palpable grief, and all the shops were closed. Yeah. So you could see that the whole city ground to a halt, and then there were pictures from Nairobi. And then today, the arrival. And what I also saw was, President Ruto's arrival at the airport and the mood at that time. So I think we've really captured the moment and the gravity of this, of the passing of a great citizen of this country. Yeah. If we strip him of everything else, we would say, here lies a great citizen, a fellow citizen. And I think in many respects, what we also have to understand is the most important job in a democracy is that of citizen, more than anything else. And he truly is a gallant citizen of this country. And I think in that connection that we've been talking about and why there's this great outpouring, people see him as a fellow citizen. So let's mourn a hero, a fellow citizen.
Nderitu?
Yesterday when, as I said, we were in the middle of something called a tax summit.
Yes.
That was going on.
That's
so
ongoing,
about 400 delegates in the room, about 1,200 online. So, as I said, for me, when the news started filtering through, and I was, so now I was caught. Anyway, I went because it's a work, it's our event. We went there, and what the delegates did was to say, look, can we observe a minute of silence? And I suppose that's really when I began to accept that, this is happening. So we observed a minute of silence. I spent the rest of the day, as I said, a bit, Today I found my composure a little bit and got involved a bit more in this process. What I remember, really, I think is burnt into my mind today, is just the sheer overwhelming numbers of Kenyans and the extraordinary feat of walking from the airport to Kasarani, and I think that will live with me, for the rest of my days. That is the depth of the emotion that Kenyans are feeling right now. I would only close by appealing, really, firstly to leaders, that the things we have spoken about today, reconciliation, the art of compromise, putting country before self, that we truly walk the talk. And for fellow Kenyans, as we mourn, please, we must dignify the Prime Minister by perhaps accepting, because of these overwhelming numbers, we have to accept direction of ushers, of the police, of the people involved. Otherwise, it can be a very long several days ahead of us.
Indeed. I was writing down a couple of words, as we were having the discussion from your descriptions of the man, and maybe those are the words that would be appropriate to close our coverage tonight. Adaptive, realist, pragmatist, versatile, citizen. That's where we close it tonight. Thank you for watching our coverage throughout the day today. Remember, tomorrow we continue with our coverage in a way only we can here on Citizen Television. That state funeral service kicks off at 9 a.m. The gates will open at Nyayo Stadium at 8 a.m. We will be live here on Citizen Television from 6 a.m. all the way until the final closing of the public viewing, which we've heard from the Deputy President will go as long as it takes. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Dr. Alex Awiti. Thank you, Dorita Murithi. And thank you all for watching our coverage tonight. We shall see you again tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Good night.